Hello, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you just tell us who you are and what you do, please?
Sure, great to be here. My name is Jon Napier. I am currently head of people at a pizzeria group, and I'm literally about to start a new exciting venture with Jumeirah Colton Tower as their HR director.
Fantastic. So we're here today to talk about leadership management, all things leadership and management. So before we dive into the questions, could you give us your opinion on what the difference between leadership and management is?
Sure. Without picturing one of the many LinkedIn posts that comes up, I suppose. I think leadership, you do a lot less, I guess. Management, I think you are there to direct and lead and kind of be very present. And I think leadership is about setting the tone and setting the expectation and the standard and about clearing the way. I think a really good leader is someone who hires good people and then enables them and removes barriers, but that's what they're there to do.
So quality-wise in somebody, what would make them an effective leader or manager? Like, what kind of things would you look for in somebody who potentially you're looking to kind of bring up in the ranks a little bit?
I think my mind immediately turns to some individuals who I've done that with, and they are passionate, they care. I think that's maybe stating the obvious, but they've got to want to do it.
Yeah.
And empathy feels like such a cop-out answer sometimes, but I think understanding people, being able to put themselves in that position and know that task is easy for them because they've done it, but that person, it might be the first time they've done it. So I think empathy is really key, but someone who wants to look after people, I think that would be a main thing that stands out.
So for somebody new, maybe someone who's about to step into or thinking about stepping into a management role, what are the kind of foundations that you would lay or you would support somebody in laying in terms of building a rapport with their team?
I think I really value trust as an umbrella topic, and I think that can mean, not necessarily just would you lend that person a tenner. It's not that kind of thing. It's you have to start with trust. You have to say, well, I know that person can do what I've employed them to do, so I'm not going to get in the way. I'm not going to undermine, or I'm not going to micromanage. I'm not going to stifle them. I want to support, but I don't want. I've hired them to do the job, so I don't have to do it, essentially. I think set your own standard. So be on time for meetings. It's a bit sort of old rules, but I think things like being on time and doing what you said you were going to do.
I was just going to say, it's the don't do as I say, do as I do kind of style, isn't it?
Or another one would maybe be stop worrying about what people aren't doing and worry about what you are doing.
Yeah.
Say less. I think that's always.
I'm going to write that one down.
People who think they've got. Yeah, I mean, in the context of this, I think say more. It would be a pretty rubbish podcast if we just didn't say anything. But not feeling like you need to speak in every meeting. I think that links back to that trust piece. Is that if you feel like you haven't contributed because you haven't said something, and that's going to reflect negatively on you, that's someone else's problem. So don't necessarily feel like you have to just chat rubbish all the time.
And so what kind of, do you have any, I guess, tricks up your sleeve that you could share, like kind of go-to methods to kind of keep that rapport and kind of keep a team motivated? Like, how do you kind of, I guess, energize the team and kind of keep that momentum going?
It's a really hard
guess
question.
Especially in kind of like hospitality where things get really busy, it can be really challenging, there's always lots to do, but I guess it's kind of, how do you give the team the time so that kind of energy levels are up here, so I guess people want to be in that role?
That's a really tough question. I think it would be around the idea of an emotional bank account. So if it's just a transactional relationship, if it's literally just, I'm going to give you minimum wage and you're going to give me your labour, The second that environment becomes more, the minimum wage stays the same, and now it's not balanced, and now people are disengaged, and now they're not going to do what you need them to do. So there's got to be more. There's got to be something else there, whether it is a relationship where you are maybe mentoring or developing that person. Maybe you're making the environment feel more caring and nurturing, so that these people come to work and they get something else out of being there. It's very easy to forget most of us started working in hospitality because it was fun. So you make it fun. And I think if you get that right, if you make sure that you're constantly paying into that bank account and making deposits, when you need to make a withdrawal, it's okay. But there has to be more there. It can't just be a single transaction, if that makes sense.
Do you think, I mean, the world has changed so much, and I think, especially over the last few years, do you think there's been a change where there's a shift in culture where it's kind of, I guess, people used to come to work, you'd work, and that was kind of it. Whereas now we kind of need to meet people more at where they're at, because expectations are slightly higher for work. We spend a lot of time at work, so people actually want to enjoy that work. So they're going to find a job, or they're going to want to find a job that they enjoy. So we kind of need to meet people kind of at that point and provide that. Do you think, has that changed over the years?
That's really interesting.
It was just a conversation we were having at an event last week, and we were kind of like debating whether that is kind of a shift that's happening and if it will continue to happen.
I think there are different reasons people go to work, and I think some people we talk about people being lucky enough to enjoy their job, and it feels like sometimes, well, everyone should enjoy their job, right? But yeah. I think there are some people I've met in my life who are quite happy with the more transactional nature of, I go and I do this thing and I get paid to do it, and then I can leave and it's completely over there. I'm not attached to it emotionally, physically, mentally at all. And there was an element where I'm quite envious of that, or I have been envious of that in the past, because I don't know if it's me or the industry I'm in, but I've never been able to just not be in work. If I'm not there physically, I'm thinking about it. We take a lot of work home with us, especially now in the people space. I think operations is about fixing things and solving problems and getting it done and doing that. People is draining, makes it sound like it's horrible. It's not, but it's quite all encompassing, and it's difficult to emotionally detach from that. So to describe that as something I love, yes, but also feels it's not like I enjoy people's misery or enjoy them being sad. Yeah. I enjoy supporting them, and I enjoy finding them, helping them find out, or helping them discover that they already knew how to do something. But yeah, I think there are different reasons people go to work, and so those of us that are still trying to figure it out, I think it's important we get that enjoyment. Yeah,
for sure.
But yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I'm going to go away and think about that more.
About it. Yeah. I'll think about that some more as well. So I guess if we look at hospitality, fast-paced, busy, can be demanding, I guess, kind of can be quite seasonal, where things get really busy. I guess we're kind of coming up towards the Christmas season. How can a leader or a manager or a supervisor, or someone who's in a role of kind of supporting a team, how can they balance the needs of the business and customers potentially versus like the well-being of their teams?
Right. That's a tough one, and I've been wrestling with this for a while. I think mostly because it's not always done to someone. It's in some cases self-inflicted, and what I mean by that is, I want you to have 2 days off, but I want to work 6. Typically with hourly paid workers. I don't want you to work more than 45 hours. Well, I want to do 60. And that's quite challenging, because you are trying to implement a positive, healthy working practice, and they are struggling maybe financially and are just trying to extract what they can out of that transactional relationship. And sometimes the offshot of that is that person will leave if you enforce that. But I think I've reconciled with that has to be an okay outcome. If they choose to leave because I'm enforcing a healthy working practice,
Okay.
I think that's okay. Somebody tell me if that's a really bad idea, but I think you've got to stand by that, because it's bad for the individual, it's bad for the business. I mean, burnout is a thing,
For sure.
and I've experienced it, and I've learned so much more about it, and how it creeps up on you, and how you can sort of see that in other people. And even recently, a few managers that are in my care, and I've seen it sort of happen before my eyes, and it's not nice. And so you're trying to prevent things like that, and you're trying to genuinely support that person. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is when someone is just dead set on, I want to do as much as I can. But I always sort of say, well, what are you going to do when that person goes on holiday? If they're effectively doing the role of two people, you can't cover it. What happens when they're not here? So it's bad for the business in that sense as well.
I guess especially long term. Short term, you might be quick fix, totally doable, but long term, it does feel like it's a recipe for disaster.
And that is becoming more and more challenging. I think where we have the different compression factors of labour costs going up and all other costs going up, and businesses being squeezed, and so you are trying to be more efficient. And in some cases, managers are then, in the worst cases, they are not hiring anyone else and allowing everyone to overwork so that their team are happy that they're getting enough. I mean, anyone who's got the answer to that, please get in touch. Come on this podcast and tell everyone. But yeah, it's really challenging.
So to touch on, you mentioned burnout and recognising burnout and seeing it creeping in. What are the signs of somebody kind of maybe facing or suffering from burnout? Like, how can maybe somebody who's new in a role, management supervisor role, what can you look out for? What are the signs?
So I think, like with many things, people tend to jump to an extreme example or a version. And so I used to think burnout was when someone just can't go on, and they crash, and in a spectacular way. I found that burnout starts with just not really enjoying your job, just not really wanting to be there, some kind of detachment or being less engaged. And so it's much easier to pick up with maybe more senior people who are responsible for more, but when their performance starts to slip, and it's not because of it's not the financial element, it's not the spend per head or the bums on seats or the head count or any of these other metrics, they're not as present maybe in a meeting. I think that's an alarm bell for me. And then if you maybe looked into their rotas and see that they haven't had, might be an obvious reason they haven't had a deputy in place for a month or two. Maybe it's just coming up to that busy time of year and they're trying to juggle staffing in general. But yeah, I think it's particularly with more senior people, it's easier because they're involved more. With the majority of your workforce, I think it highlights the importance of regular conversation, regular communication, in terms of not just a quarterly or dreaded annual, even I hope no one still does it like that, but one-to-one element, but just as regular as you can, just saying hi, checking in with that person, starting a conversation. You should have an awareness of what's going on in someone's life anyway, who's in your team. I appreciate that, again, in the people space, I think there's some fantastic data coming out. Can I say the name of a company?
Are you going to say This Is Pineapple?
Yes, this is Pineapple. Absolutely fantastic new initiative that started this year, and it's people-based data, and they've got things like number of headcount per people team, and it sits at about 100 at the moment, which you sort of look at and go, well, that's me, but is that okay? And I remember one of the biggest GM roles I had was a team of over 100, and it's really challenging to look after that many people, to know that many names and surnames, and do they have a relationship, and what's going on, and they're like pets, and that's hard. So to be responsible for that number, I mean, that's not easy. It's
a big responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's about 100 head count per person, which I think that's crazy.
Abby was our last guest on
Oh, you didn't tell me that. I would
I'd wait.
not have come in. I could not follow that.
We spoke about recruitment.
Okay. Oh, fine. Okay.
Different topic. So you touched on it just now by saying kind of having that kind of time with people. So I guess if we touched on communication, because that will play a huge part in kind of spending time with people. But I guess it's not just kind of what you say, it's how you say these things and how you communicate with people that will be really, you know, I guess have like a huge influence on people's well-being in the workplace.
I think it goes back to that transactional element. I think if all you ever do is communicate an instruction or an expectation, I don't think you can expect a lot back. I think there's got to be an exchange. How did you think that was? What did you think of that? Did you enjoy that event? Are you coming to that event? Can you come to that training session? I think you'd be brilliant at this. And then equally, can I make you a coffee? I mean, I am not only the head of people, I'm like the company barista. Like every time I go into the business, chef, coffee, make your coffee. It just starts a rapport, a conversation. And before you know it, they're talking about the new starter who's brilliant, or, you know, that they're having a tough time, or they weren't sure how to opt out of their pension, or, you know, any of the above. But you've got to have some kind of intentional communication. You've got to go in and say, right, I'm going to start a conversation with this person. But yeah, there's got to be more to it.
We did a mental health first aid course a few months ago now, and we did a really great exercise on active listening, and it really made me think, because I mean, you know, I felt really guilty afterwards, because my kids will talk and talk and talk to me, and I'm like, yeah, you're not listening, right? And it was an exercise where half the group had to go outside, and the group inside were told to come up with a story, and then when the next group came in, you relay that story. I was part of the group who went outside, and when we went outside, we were told to go in, sit down. The person that we were paired up with would talk to us, and we had to do everything in our power to ignore them. And it was really hard. It was horrible, because this person who I had never met before was trying to relay a story to me, and I was being incredibly rude by looking around. I picked up a newspaper, you know, and my partner at the time was like, oh God, like, you know, I wanted to cry. Like, it was horrible. Wow. But it was just that thing where, you know, somebody will speak to you and you might be busy running around doing things, and you think you're listening, you think you've heard, but were you really? Like, did you, you know, what would have happened if you stopped what you were doing and said, okay, you know, we've got 5 minutes, I then have to jump back on this, or I'm really sorry, I can't talk about this right now. Can we grab 5 minutes in 20 minutes time, and then you'll be all mine. It is that active listening piece that I think really, really makes a difference.
Yes, and not just the ignoring them or anything, but for me, doing that whole active listening piece, it was about not spending the entire time that person's talking, having your response ready.
Yeah.
Or thinking about, and that's particularly difficult, especially when you feel the pressure of wanting to give a good answer. You find it very difficult, or I find it very difficult to listen to you entirely, and then consider my response, whereas actually my internal voice is already going, and therefore I'm not entirely listening. So maybe, can I just check that I've understood that? Are you saying this?
Yeah.
But yeah, active listening is
it's a skill.
Well, it's not, I was going to say it's such an underrated, I don't think it is. I just think it's something that is so easy to sort of forget or drop, or you might come to work going, today I'm going to actively listen out of this, you know, all day actively listening. And then you come in and someone's like, the toilet's blocked, and you're like, right.
Yeah.
And then you're in, and it just, you've got to do it very consciously, I think.
And it is one of those things that, you know, it's free. Like, it's it's a tool that you can have up your sleeve.
Yeah, you don't need a budget.
And exactly. And, you know, it's giving people the time and the space, and it's not.
Well, it's time, isn't it?
Yes.
Sorry to talk across
time.
you. It's that, you know, the most valuable thing you can give someone is your time. And I do subscribe to that. I think not that you're really important, but giving someone that entirety of yourself, being really present, means you can't be doing other things. So this whole, like, I can multitask, it's like, no, close your laptop, you know, that really should just not be a thing anyway. Put your phone down, turn it off. That's your time that you can't do anything else with. So it is valuable. But I think people do appreciate it. I think it does come across more.
And I think it's definitely, you're right, if you're in a position of supporting people, you will feel responsible, but knowing that you don't have to have all the answers either, because you can say, you know, maybe someone presents a situation to you and you're like, I don't know what to do. That's okay. There are ways of working through that, and there's places that you can go to help support that person and find those answers, but it's okay to not know what to say as well.
Absolutely. Saying I don't know is, again, a skill. People sometimes go, I should come up with something, but you can say, I've never come across that. I find myself more and more actually catching myself. I don't think I've said to anyone, I know how you feel, in years. Just because that was one of the first things that was highlighted. It's like, yeah, but do you? Or how can you? Yeah. And so I just don't say that anymore at all, because even if I do, you're going to find that annoying. So little phrases like that. But yeah, I think it's okay to say, I've got no idea what that must be like. Do you want to talk about it some more? Well-being and wellness are the same thing in my mind. Great. Therefore, I do have an answer for you. Okay, great. So in my mind, wellness is about enabling someone to be equally good at everything they have to be in their life. So if you are a parent, but you are a head of, and you are a partner, and you are a brother or a sibling, and all of these things, the roles you play, a good indicator of wellness is, are you able to balance all of those? It doesn't have to be equal, because, you know, I maybe speak to my parents once a month, you know, and I speak to my wife every day. But do you feel like you can give as much as you need to each of those roles? That's my measure of wellness. And therefore, I think things that are very useful are making sure you give people time to do the things that are important to them. They're amongst this whole conversation about come back to the office. Don't come to the office. Everyone's in the office 2 days a week. You know, we're not even talking anymore about the fact that people are having lunch at their desk most days. You know, or it's kind of an unspoken thing where, you took an hour for lunch. You know, that almost being a bad thing, but that time's so important. Like, go for a walk. Like, genuinely, I think, to your specific question, what tips would you say to, you know, encourage well-being or wellness within a team? Go for a walk, do something at lunch, or take a break, or if you've got a phone call, you know, put your pods in and go around the block. We're very fortunate to have so many nice sort of places to walk around in London and things, but even if you've just got a courtyard, get out and walk. The other one would be is diversify what you do in a day. I discovered that there's an app called Blinkist, which takes books and condenses them into what they call blinks, but it essentially helps you digest the message of a book in about 15 minutes. No. And it's brilliant for people like me who aren't great readers. That is brilliant. And it's because it's audio as well. You can read it or you can listen to it. It's fantastic. And I started off by searching HR books, you know, but actually the best thing I did was listen to one about animals that can talk, you know, the language of animals or intelligence of pets. Nothing to do with your day, but it just means that your brain has started doing something else, and it's very interesting. And then you come in and you talk to someone, and when we go into those conversations about, can I make you a coffee? Did you know that parrots know this many? And it's just completely pointless facts. But I think that's really important to diversify what you think about, because you can't do anything well for 8 hours. For you know, there's probably some people in the world who can, but I would defy anyone to be effective for that long on a single thing. And so being a manager or a leader, making sure that you're doing those things, absolutely, so that then it trickles down and that sets the scene, right? You said it earlier, do what I say, not what I do. And there's so many managers who, I don't know whether they do it consciously or not, but they're very much about, no, you need to take a break and you need to do this. And it's like, but why haven't you had any days off this week? Well, because if I don't do it, no one will. Yeah. And it's like, that isn't going to work. That's that. I mean, I used to be very guilty of that. But I think you've actually absolutely got to practice what you preach. You've got to take that time away. You've got to share your own personal life and stories. People talk about being vulnerable. That could just be, yeah, it was a tough morning. You know, couldn't get the kids to school on time. You know, all hell broke loose over a piece of Lego, whatever it is. You've got to share that as well, because if you resist that kind of relationship with your team for, you know, a professional reason, you can't expect the same thing to happen. Everything comes from your example as a leader. You show the team how you expect things to work. So yeah, you can't say, I want you to do all these things, but I'm going to be over here working 7 days a week, leaving after everyone, never doing anything else, having a lunch at my desk and never going out for a walk. That doesn't work.
And it's hard because when people do get busy, people tend to go, oh, it's fine, I'll just do this, you know, maybe once, twice, and then it becomes a habit. So I guess it's just
Slippery
being
slope.
really conscious that by doing that, it does set an example, especially if you're in a leadership or management position.
Yes, and I would bring back in some of the things I talked about earlier. I think that's where, again, I would point to the importance of that trust element, because when things are difficult, it's no good just throwing out everything that makes you an effective team. That even saying that just sounds ridiculous. Why would you throw out all the best practice when things are harder and expect a different outcome? So it can be very difficult to kind of hold fast and take an hour lunch when it's December. You know, there's that whole thing, isn't there, about, well, obviously you don't take holiday in December. It's like, well, why not?
Yeah.
Like, do you not have enough people on? Yeah, I think that you absolutely need to, that's more important, to stick to those principles when it's hard, when it's not going well. Otherwise you seriously can't expect it will just be fine. And if you get through it, I'd be very skeptical about being able to then go back.
Yeah, right.
Because
exactly.
Look at your numbers. Look at the efficiency savings.
Yeah.
What you mean, everyone working to the bone and not, you know, being understaffed and everyone burning themselves out.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not a healthy business.
No. So for somebody who is thinking about or going to step into a leadership role, and it might not be happening for a little while, what things would you recommend they suggest kind of maybe doing some research on, or thinking about kind of what leader or manager they'd like to be?
I was asked a question that made me think a lot, is what would you like your team to say about you?
Oh.
So that then, I mean, I don't know about you, but it makes me stop and go, almost sort of like, what, are they here now? Like, but
give me a few days.
Yeah, someone who would like to move into a leadership role, it's what sort of leader do you want to be? What would you like your team to say about you? And you're using that as a kind of a flag, you know, something, a line in the sand, whatever phrase you want to use. That's your anchor point. That's what you need to kind of work towards. So you might say, well, I want to be known as, you know, the hard driver who gets things done. You know, fine, each to their own. But if you say that, that's what you can then be consistent, I think. And so be consistent in your approach. Do what you said you were going to do. And if you need to make notes, or if you need to record it, whatever works for you, find a way of not forgetting the commitments you've made to people, even if it's just in passing. Like, oh, you said you'd do that. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. And it's just annoying for that person. And it might be really low down on your list, but it's the most important thing to them that day. And you're not going to know that. So yeah, you've got to be organised, do what you say you've got to do, find a way of sticking to those commitments, and think about what sort of leader you want to be, so that you can work towards that all the time. Kind of like a personal value in some way, like a business would go, well, this is what we do and who we are. This is who I am and what I do. So, yeah.
A piece of advice.
A single, I don't know. Could I pick one?
Or if I was to maybe flip the question and say, I'm taking on new management, new kind of recruits underneath me, building my team's getting bigger. I'm looking to kind of improve my leadership skills. What would you say to me that might help me on that journey?
So I was going to go and run the biggest bar in my company's portfolio, and it was an amazing opportunity, and I was really, really excited to go and do it. And I went and met the sort of incumbent general manager for like a handover. He was going on to do something fantastic. It wasn't like an awkward sort of like, you don't know that I'm going to be replacing you or anything. He was genuinely excited to show me around and everything else. And the scale of the operation was enormous. And he said to me, the most important thing you need to do is learn everyone's name. And what was brilliant about that is we were walking around the city where the bar was, and it wasn't just in the bar. You know, the fishmonger was like, all right, Mike, and then go down the butcher and be like, all right, Mike, and then the flower person, I was like, you're a bit of a celebrity. He was like, you've got to know these people. This is your community. This is like, these are your customers, or they're your staff. Everyone's a customer or staff member, potentially. And I thought that was brilliant advice. And I've always done that whenever I've gone into a new business. The first thing I do, whether I write it down on my phone and little notes to help me remind myself, like, oh, Dave, Blue Apron, like Kelly likes cats, whatever it is, remember people's names, learn names first of all. So I think that allows you to do everything else.
I like that, because it might seem like a small thing, but actually if you think about going in or, leading a team and getting someone's name wrong can give the impression that you just don't really care. If you don't care enough to know my name,
well, and
do you care about
as a
any
follow-up
more
to
than
that, you said about not being afraid to say I don't know. Don't be afraid to say, like, I'm so sorry, I've forgotten. Because you're allowed to if you're learning dozens of names, but don't guess, or don't do that thing where you avoid using it. So you're just like,
hey mate,
yeah, all right, fella, let's and then 6 months later you have to describe that person. You're like, do you not know my name yet?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think learn people's names. Great advice then, and I've done it ever since. And the biggest thing it helped with is I think going into a business is hard. At any level, there's so many internal thoughts and external factors and everything. So just going in and being friendly and being able to say, oh, hi Adam, how are you? And I think that's important, if that's okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much.